Please be seated. Dear colleagues, please be seated. Please be seated, dear colleagues. Please take your seats. We will start. Is my tie okay?
Tu es magnifique.
Toutes les photos et tout ça.
Tu es magnifique.
This one also?
Super. Now, this you have to make a little bit
Up.
Great.
OK. Mon cher collègue, je déclare ouverte la 4e partie de la session ordinaire de 2021 de l'Assemblée parlementaire du Conseil de l'Europe. Je souhaite la bienvenue à toutes et tous ici présents ainsi qu'en ligne. Nous avons une belle séance devant nous. J'ai demandé à notre secrétaire général d'Espina de me raconter, de m'informer de combien de nos collègues sont présents. Et quand nous voyons qu'on a quand même été le premier de sortir du marais du Covid un tout petit peu, on est passé dans nos sessions hybrides de 80 à plus de 100, à 150. Et si j'ai bien compris, on est aujourd'hui avec 270 collègues en présentiel ici à Strasbourg. Et en plus, évidemment, tous les collègues, toutes les collègues qui nous rejoignent par vidéo, pour le dire ainsi. Je voudrais tout d'abord remercier toutes les instances formelles officielles ainsi que les autorités françaises, mais surtout notre équipe aussi ici à l'intérieur, sous la gestion de notre secrétaire général, de mener à bien à ce que cette session se déroule dans des conditions les plus favorables pour effectivement faire notre travail. Et donc, grand merci à toutes et tous qui ont fait que nous pouvons être ensemble, parce que, comme vous le savez, le présentiel est tellement différent que de se voir que par un petit écran ou un grand écran, dépendant d'où vous vous trouvez. Comme d'habitude, je vais mener la réunion en anglais, ceci pour faciliter la vie de nos traducteurs, because if I go from French to English, maybe to Dutch, over Spanish and what have you, it'll make life quite difficult for the translators. Dear colleagues, I would like to start by paying tribute to Marie-Louise Bemelmans-Videk from the Netherlands and Martin Hebner from Germany, both active members of the Parliamentary Assembly who served with conviction and commitment the causes and values of the Council of Europe and our Assembly. Our colleague Marie-Louise was also a long-standing, hard-working and devoted member of the selection panel of the Vaclav Havel Human Rights Prize. May I invite you to join me in observing a minute of silence in their memory. Thank you, dear colleagues.
There is a technical problem of interpretation. Tell them.
There's apparently a technical problem of interpretation, so I'm supposed to... It's okay. Voila, let's head out.
1 minute more.
1 minute still to go. I could crack a joke, but I don't suppose that's what I'm supposed to do in my opening remarks, Despina.
Just be patient, please.
Et si je ne fais pas attention, comme il n'y a pas de traduction, je me ferai gronder par la secrétaire générale, évidemment. Ah bah oui. So bide with me for a second
We are waiting for the signal.
to start with some of my opening remarks. As always,
This is the opening.
just bide with me, dear colleagues, until the technical translation issue is solved. Kimmo, as always, I have to ask you to put on your mask, my good friend. This is the beginning of any session, you know. We all know Kimmo. But it's a trick to be noticed, I know that.
So, President, can you just cut the microphone?
Dear colleagues, we need to reboot the system apparently, so this will take between 5 and 10 minutes. I do apologize, but there's no other way, because I don't think it would be appropriate for me to start a meeting not having all the translation on board. Donc je m'excuse auprès de toutes et tous, mais il faut redémarrer le système, comme quoi toutes les traductions puissent se faire. Et donc je ne pense pas que ce sera correct de démarrer. Donc nous avons 3 langues, mais bon, il y en a 5 que nous devons avoir. Donc je vous demande entre 5 et 10 minutes de patience et je m'en excuse. Voila, problem settled. May I ask you to be seated, dear colleagues? I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you at the beginning of this important session. And as a matter of fact, when I drove back home yesterday after the jury of the Vaclav Havel Prize, the emblematic person that Vaclav Havel is and what he represents, I couldn't get this very well-known sentence from Hamlet out of my head. You all know that. I mean, to be or not to be, that's the question. But the interesting part is the next sentence in that piece. I mean, Act 3, Scene 1, the nunnery. I see a British colleague, he knows all of that. And basically it goes, to be or not to be, that is the question. And then it comes, whether it's nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing end them. If you look at that, I couldn't get it out of my mind, because what we do as a parliamentary assembly is exactly that. We take up arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing end them. That's basically what we do. And even if you look into the way we have been working the last months, we've been doing that by addressing in a thematic way very important issues set aside from tackling issues at hand, such as we will be doing in this session, Madam Secretary General, the Afghanistan issue, the Western Balkans, the Belarus issue, and of course, aside of that, doing our business in monitoring and what have you, but addressing certain troubles at sea in a very substantial way, thematically, does give substance to our cooperation with the Committee of Ministers, which is, at the end, what we should do. We did it with COVID, where we had all of our reports. We had the guidelines of our Secretary General, and we even had a unanimous support to the Athens Declaration in the Assembly. We addressed artificial intelligence, where we substantially put some added value to the table of the Committee of Ministers. We readdressed the issue of violence against women through the Istanbul Convention, and we do have some results, to the extent that even we are welcoming today our colleagues from Mexico who are into the process of adopting it. And at the same time, we see the emergence of a new generation of rights. Just to give you a couple of examples, the right to know the truth. I mean, in the environment we are living in today, with fake news and misinformation, there is something like a new right to know the truth, reliable information. And tackling that for all different angles in a thematic, holistic way, in my mind, is certainly worth of looking into. Or just look at the right to privacy. If you see what's happening today, I'm not going to make myself very popular with the intelligence services, but still, there's a difference between privacy and secrecy. So also that is something that might be addressed in a thematic, holistic way. The right to be equal certainly is an issue. And I have to say that over the last months, we do have a number of people who still think, and even more people who think, that the right of being equal is being the same. No, it's not the case. Being equal is not being the same. On the contrary, being equal is, whilst being different, still have equal rights. That's what it's all about. And so it turns, in my mind, from the right to be equal into the right to be different. Also an issue that might be addressed in a very holistic and thematic way. And obviously the item that we will treat in a very substantive way on Wednesday, environment, clean, safe, healthy, sustainable environment. Is it a human right? I believe it is. And we will address that in a very, very substantial way in order to deliver substance to the Committee of Ministers. But coming back to be or not to be, when I look at it from the angle of the Assembly, in my view, it translates into to lead or not to lead. You know, when you take arms against the troubles at sea, you can follow someone other. You can follow those who lead, or you can take the lead yourself. And this is, Madam Secretary General, what we have been doing over 70 years. Not always with the greatest success, but to the essence, it is my conviction that that is what we should do. To be or not to be transforms into lead or not to lead, because if you don't lead, you don't exist. It's very simple. And so, to that matter, I think that if you look on top of that towards the environmental question, there's two great examples that we see in the, the recent past, if you wish, or the foreseeable future. We got the COP26, you all know that. Committee of the Parties, 26. This is a convention of 1992, dear colleagues. This is the 26th time that a lot of people will be meeting, making a lot of efforts over 30 years. But on the other hand, we do have to recognize that the environment is not going the right way. After 26 meetings and 30 years, with all the efforts that have been made by so many people, big question mark to me. And then on the other hand, you've got a light going on from the United Nations. I had a discussion with Mr. Guterres last year where I told him, why don't you introduce the issue of environment in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? At that time, many of the people around him were asking themselves, oh, are you serious? By the way, I had the same reflection at the beginning of last year when I had the honor and the privilege of addressing this assembly for the first time, when I spoke exactly about that, of could we envisage to introduce environment into our European Convention of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. And that exactly, dear colleagues, is the debate that we were going to have in the next days, and specifically on Wednesday. So the idea, or basically the effort that we will make, is to deliver in a holistic, thematic way all the elements on the table that I hope the Committee of Ministers, I'm looking at them now, not to put pressure on you because that's not possible, but still, I hope that we can deliver to the substance the whole kaleidoscope of options that might be looked into through a feasibility study to discuss and to decide whether, after a feasibility study, what is the best way of tackling it. Would it be by just having guidelines? Would it be by setting standards? Would it be by having binding rules? Would it be through a convention? Or would it be through the introduction of the issue of environment itself in the convention? And so I do hope that when we deliver the substance, as we did with artificial intelligence, with COVID, with violence against women, and the other ones coming in the next months and years, I would really hope that we can together look into the issue and see what would be the most appropriate way to indeed establish the fact that a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is a human right, because it is linked to Article 2 of the Convention itself, the right to life. What is life worth if you cannot live it in a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment? And so this is what I wanted to share with you at the beginning, that the task at hand for the Assembly is, of course, addressing troubles at sea, is, of course, monitoring. But at the same time, we should continue on certain important issues in a thematic, holistic way in order to connect to the Committee of Ministers, for them to take it on or not, I hope yes, to develop, to look into it, and to do what the Council of Europe as a whole is supposed to do, namely, in a multilateral way, setting standards. That is basically what we do to the benefit of all of the citizens in our 47 member states, and even beyond that, being an example. And that brings me back to the to be or not to be, that I translate into to lead or not to lead. Are we followers or are we leaders? And if I respond to that simple question, to lead or not to lead, that is the question, my response, dear colleagues, is very simple. I say we lead. Thank you. Dear colleagues, the first item on the agenda is the examination of credentials of new members. The names of the representatives and substitutes are in document 15377. If no credentials are challenged, the credentials will be ratified. Any challenges? I don't see any. The credentials are ratified, and I welcome our new colleagues. Then it goes, in my papers, go to page 11. So you just saved us 8 pages. Our next business is to consider the changes proposed in the membership of committees. These are set out in document Commissions Committee 2021-07 and addendum. Are the proposed changes in the membership of the Assembly's committees agreed to? I thank you. Before we examine the draft agenda, the Assembly needs to consider requests for urgent procedure and current affairs debates. I have received the following: a request for a debate under urgent procedure on draft second additional protocol to the Convention on Cybercrime on enhanced cooperation and disclosure of electronic evidence. This is presented by the 5 political groups. It is basically to feed again into the work of the Committee of Ministers, because we need to give an opinion, and we took the shortcut of an urgent affairs debate to do so. Second, a request for debate under urgent procedure on the situation in Afghanistan, consequences for Europe and the region, presented by the 5 political groups. A request for a current affairs debate on the Western Balkans between democratic challenges and European aspirations, what role for the Council of Europe, presented by the 5 political groups. So all those are presented by the 5 political groups. Then we have a request for a debate under urgent procedure on increased migration pressure on the borders of Latvia, Lithuania and Poland with Belarus, presented by Mr. Mularczyk and 23 members of the Assembly, and a request for a current affairs debate on political persecution of indigenous peoples in Crimea by Russia, presented by the Ukrainian delegation. The Bureau agreed on Friday morning to the 3 debates under urgent procedure and 1 current affairs debate on the Western Balkans, and we will first consider each request for a debate under urgent procedure individually, and then we will consider the request for current affairs debates. Voila. So, we come to the request for debate under urgent procedure on the draft additional protocol to the Convention on Cybercrime on enhanced cooperation disclosure of electronic evidence, requested by the 5 political groups. On Friday, the Bureau agreed to do this request. Does the Assembly agree with the Bureau's recommendation? Agreed. Good. Then we come to the request for debate on the urgent procedure. I propose that the topic of the debate we just agreed to be referred to the Committee on Legal Affairs for report. Is this agreed to too? Thank you. Then we come to the request for debate on the urgent procedure situation in Afghanistan. Does the Assembly agree with the Bureau's recommendation to hold the debate? It's very good that I've got someone who tells me that everyone agrees. Thank you for that. I propose, no, continue to do so. It'll make life a little bit easier. I propose that the topic of the debate we have just agreed be referred to the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy for report. Is this agreed? Well, thank you very much. Good. Well, there we go to the 3rd request for an urgent procedure debate on increased migration pressure on the borders of Latvia, Lithuania and Poland with Belarus. On Friday, the Bureau agreed to this request. Does the Assembly agree with the Bureau's recommendation? Voila. Thank you. I propose that the topic of the debate we have just agreed be referred to the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons for report. Does the Assembly agree? Okay. Okay, the timing of the, yes, good. The timing of the 3 urgent affairs debates will be considered.
President, we have a request on the floor.
I will come immediately to that. The timing of the 3 urgent procedure debates will be considered at the adoption of the agenda after we have considered the request for current affairs debate, but I am informed that someone wishes to take the floor. Mr. Kislak wishes to have the floor, and I have to take this. Mr. Kislak, you have the floor.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Должен сказать, немножко удивлен, с какой скоростью вы утверждаете вопросы, по которым даже согласия нет. Например, я, как и многие мои коллеги, против обсуждения вопроса, связанного с Беларусью, потому что он надуманный, искусственный, и я не думаю, что мы можем констатировать, что мы единогласно утверждаем это как пункт для повестки дня. Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. I do apologize that I didn't see you asking for the floor, and since I've got my whisperer in the room, it went a bit fast. So I've got one member who opposes the debate. Do we have someone who wishes to take the floor? I've got someone out there. You've got the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goncharenko, Ukrainian delegation. I'm one of those who signed this urgent debates request. And we are sure that that's extremely important question when Belarus dictator Lukashenko weaponized people, migrants, and using them. And we already have casualties on the border. I'm not surprised that Russian delegation is opposing, because Lukashenko is doing it together with Putin, it's for sure. So we need a debate on this issue for sure. Thank you very much. I want to ask everybody to support this urgent debate.
Thank you very much.
Two-thirds.
In order to reject the proposal by the Bureau, my Secretary General signals that we need.
In order to accept the proposal.
So in order to accept the proposal, we need a two-thirds in the vote. Is that it? Mr. Kislak, do you request a vote? I suppose you do. I don't have you online, but I suppose you do. Mr. Kislak?
The Bureau was in fact just read that.
Да, спасибо большое за понимание моей линии. Ну, за то, чтобы проголосовать по этому вопросу.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, just for all of you to know, the Bureau was in favor. We shall now vote on the request for urgent procedure. The decision requires a two-thirds majority. Those who are in favor of holding this urgent affairs debate, which has been proposed by the Bureau, vote yes. Those who are against holding such a debate should vote no. Alex?
No, not during the vote.
Well, the vote is not open yet. Alex?
If we are voting yes, we are voting to hold in favor of the debate. Yes, thank you very much.
Those who vote yes say yes to the debate. Those who vote no say no to the debate. Thank you for the clarification. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Results, please. Thank you very much. That is a clear two-thirds majority, so the urgent affairs debate will be held. We now come, the timing of the three approved upon urgent procedure debates will be considered at the adoption on the agenda after we have considered the request for current affairs debate. We've got two. We come now to the request for a current affairs debate on the Western Balkans between democratic challenges and European aspirations. What role for the Council of Europe? This is requested by the 5 political groups. At its meeting on Friday, the Bureau approved this request and therefore recommends to the Assembly that the matter be debated during the part session. Does the Assembly agree to this recommendation? Now I'll have to look to my screen. Okay. Good. So then this has been decided. The Bureau's recommendation is accepted and the request for a current affairs debate is approved. The debate will be opened by Mr. George Papandreou. Then we come to a current affairs debate request on political persecution of indigenous peoples in Crimea by Russia, requested by the Ukrainian delegation. At its meeting on Friday, the Bureau rejected this request for a debate. Is there an objection to the Bureau's position? I see to my left, Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, dear President. Hello, colleagues. Many of you are finally here physically. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Secretary General for her personal participation in the Crimean platform in the end of August. We have seen the reaction from the Russian Federation, unfortunately, in the end of August, capturing more than 40 Crimean Tatars, and now they are awaiting for the prosecutions. We do hope that there will be also a reaction of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, where we have received already a list from her, and we understand that the Bureau declined it, but we would like to take this opportunity to suggest to proceed with the follow-up of the June file on the breach of the human rights of the Crimean people, which we voted with a vast majority. Thank you, dear colleagues, and to send this issue, which is inherited in this topic of the current affairs debate to the monitoring committee and to the Committee on Equality. Thank you, dear President. Merci.
Thank you, Madam. Do you request a vote on the issue? I don't suppose so. I don't see you requesting it. Therefore, the proposition of the Bureau is followed, and the current affairs debate will not be held, if I am correct. Thank you. The next item of business is the adoption of the agenda for the fourth part of the 2021 ordinary session. The draft agenda submitted for the Assembly's approval was drawn up by the Bureau on September 6, 2021, and updated on Friday. It is proposed that the debates on the urgent procedure and current affairs debates that we have just agreed upon, the 3+1, will take place on Thursday, September 30, as set out in the draft agenda. The urgent debate on Afghanistan would take place first in the morning sitting, and the deadline, dear colleagues, for amendments will be 12 at noon. The current affairs debate on the Western Balkans would also take place in the morning after the address by the Deputy Prime Minister from Macedonia. The debate on increased migration pressure on borders with Belarus would take place at the start of the afternoon session, and also with the deadline for amendments at noon on Wednesday. This will be followed by the debate on the additional protocol to the Convention on Cybercrime, which will have a deadline for amendments at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday. So here the deadline is the day before in the evening, 7:30. Finally, in view of the large number of speakers inscribed on the list, the Bureau proposes that rapporteurs for reports limit their presentation of reports to 7 minutes and 3 minutes to reply to the debate. Is this agreed upon? Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the progress report of the Bureau and the Standing Committee. May I ask my Vice President, Andrikiene, is she in the room?
She was standing up for 10 minutes.
Voila, I do apologize that it took a little bit longer. So please, if you would help me in guiding our colleagues in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. It's okay. Thank you.
Just look into that.
Dear colleagues, as it has been already announced, the next item on the agenda is the debate on the progress report of the Bureau and Standing Committee, presented by Mr. Jacques Maire. This will be combined with consideration of the reports of the ad hoc committee of the Bureau on observation of the early parliamentary elections in Armenia, which took place on the 20th of June 2021, presented by Mr. George Katrougalos. Observation of the early parliamentary elections in Bulgaria, 11th of July 2021, presented by Mr. Alfred Herr, and observation of the early parliamentary elections in the Republic of Moldova, which took place on the 11th of July 2021, presented by Mr. Stefan Schenach. We will interrupt the debate at 12:25 for the prize award ceremony for the Vaclav Havel Human Rights Prize. The debate will continue this afternoon at 3:30 p.m. And now I call Mr. Maire to present the progress report. You have 7 minutes to present the report, and then we'll have a further 3 minutes to reply to the debate at the end. Mr. Maire, the floor is yours, please.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Madame la Présidente, chers collègues, Madame la Secrétaire Générale, je suis très heureux de pouvoir vous présenter ce rapport d'activité du Bureau et de la Commission permanente de notre Assemblée pour la période du 21 juin au 22 septembre. Comme il est de coutume, je n'entrerai pas dans le détail de toutes les activités qui sont signalées dans le rapport, évidemment. Je me concentrerai sur quelques axes signifiants politiquement pour notre organisation. Je voudrais d'abord évoquer non pas une mission d'observation électorale, mais une mission d'évaluation des élections. Je pense bien sûr aux élections législatives en Fédération de Russie. Elle s'est déroulée entre le 17 et le 20 septembre. Elle a été présidée par notre collègue suisse, avec toute la tempérance qu'on lui connaît, Pierre-Alain Frides. J'en étais membre. Et je voudrais simplement vous rappeler à cette occasion le raisonnement du bureau de l'Assemblée, qui a pris la décision non pas d'envoyer une mission d'observation, mais une mission d'évaluation restreinte de 5 personnes. Il n'y avait pas d'observateurs de longue durée assurée par nos partenaires de l'OSCE et du Bureau international des droits de l'homme, du fait d'un non-accord sur la présence, le nombre d'observateurs, et il aurait donc été impossible pour notre Assemblée d'observer ce scrutin d'une manière crédible. En même temps, notre bureau a estimé, après de longues délibérations et après avoir soupesé le pour et le contre, y compris en lien avec nos institutions partenaires, que notre Assemblée se devait d'être présente sur place, y compris pour nourrir notre évaluation de la situation politique en Russie. Alors bien sûr, nous réexprimons aujourd'hui notre regret du fait que les autorités de la Fédération de Russie n'aient pas pu trouver un accord avec l'OSCE et notre Assemblée pour permettre une observation électorale effective, d'autant plus dans un contexte difficile marqué à la fois par la pandémie, c'est vrai, et savez-vous quand même que quand on regarde ce qui s'est passé dans les autres opérations électorales pour des pays eux-mêmes effectivement ayant été impactés par la pandémie, ces observations ont été possibles. Et puis, évidemment, nous avons pu constater la nouvelle façon d'organiser le scrutin et les critiques extrêmement graves exprimées par l'opposition. L'environnement dans lequel se sont déroulées les élections a, selon toute vraisemblance, eu un impact sur le résultat elle-même et sur la capacité de choisir. Bien sûr, nous n'en parlerons pas à ce stade, puisqu'il y a des échéances prévues. Ces préoccupations très sérieuses feront l'objet d'un rapport du président Frides destiné au bureau de notre Assemblée, et elles seraient prises naturellement en compte de façon stricte dans les systèmes de redevabilité que nous avons au sein du Conseil de l'Europe et dans le rapport sur le respect des engagements et des obligations de la Fédération de Russie. En même temps, je ne peux que noter, bien sûr, la bonne coopération des autorités russes avec notre commission pour le déroulement de ces activités, à la fois en lien avec les auditions que nous avons faites et puis les visites dans les bureaux. J'encourage évidemment les autorités russes et les membres de la délégation nationale de la Douma auprès de notre Assemblée à poursuivre, mais surtout à améliorer la coopération et le dialogue, notamment dans le cadre de la commission de suivi. On verra aussi, ce sera fait par les présidents des missions tout à l'heure, que nous avons pu observer d'autres scrutins en Europe et au-delà, en Arménie, en République de Moldova, en Bulgarie et au Maroc. Et donc cela prouve que la pandémie ne peut plus être un prétexte pour manquer aux obligations auprès de notre organisation. Ensuite, je souhaiterais évoquer rapidement la situation en Afghanistan. Les 5 groupes politiques ont effectivement demandé un débat d'urgence sur ses conséquences sur l'Europe et la région. Il est important que notre organisation, défenseur des droits de l'homme et des libertés fondamentales, puisse se saisir d'un sujet, bien sûr, un peu éloigné sur le plan géographique, mais qui aura des conséquences internationales et européennes assez fortes dans la période à venir. Enfin, j'aimerais, comme nous le faisons depuis plusieurs sessions maintenant, aborder la question du Bélarus. La répression des opposants au président Loukachenko et à l'encontre de la société civile dans son ensemble continue de façon massive. Nous continuons d'appeler à la libération immédiate des prisonniers politiques, qui sont aujourd'hui plus de 650. Nous sommes aussi préoccupés, comme en témoigne une autre demande de débat d'urgence, par le rôle que semblent jouer les Biélorusses dans l'intensification des flux migratoires aux frontières du Bélarus avec la Lettonie, la Lituanie et la Pologne. Les termes de guerre hybride contre nos États ont été effectivement employés lors du bureau. C'est une formulation à laquelle je souscris complètement. Il n'est pas possible de continuer à instrumentaliser à ce point la misère des réfugiés dans les conflits politiques. Pour terminer, je voudrais féliciter notre président de l'Assemblée, cher Rick Dems, qui continue à organiser d'une manière exemplaire le travail de notre Assemblée dans des conditions exceptionnelles. Je suis également reconnaissant à l'administration et aux autorités françaises. Espérons que nos travaux pourront reprendre bientôt normalement. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And now I call on Mr. Katrougalos to present the report on the observation of the early parliamentary elections in Armenia. You have 3 minutes. Mr. Katrougalos, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'm very glad to be among you at this new fresh start of our Assembly. The political climate in the elections of Armenia have been determined by two rather uncommon factors. The first one was the momentum of the public revolt of 3 years ago, which has completely upset the political system in the country. The long-dominant Republican Party has not even ensured its representation at the elections in 2018. On the other hand, we had the failed war with Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh, and the frustration that this defeat has created. The opposition has very strongly criticized the government over this war, and the climate was very much poisoned, very much polarized, inflammatory speech that sometimes overcome the border of hate speech. The institutional framework was generally comprehensive and following the standards of the Council of Europe. One exception maybe is the relatively high thresholds for the parties to enter the parliament. It is 5% for the political parties, but 7% for the coalition, which results to about 1/4 of the electorate not to be represented at the parliament. The civil society is very vibrant. Generally, the freedoms are respected. There are 50 public mass media broadcasters, including nationwide media, both TV and radio stations. Generally, the elections have been held in an unprofessional and efficient way. A fear we had regarding the eventuality of contesting the results of the elections if they were very close, fortunately, did not get materialized, exactly because there was a very big difference between the first party, which gained 53% of the elections, and the opposition. We can say, just to summarize, that the dramatical change which has occurred at the so-called Velvet Revolution of 2018 has been generally reconfirmed in 2021. We have the second democratic elections on the row, and that creates a lot of optimism regarding the future of Republican and democratic institutions in the country. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Katrougalos. Now I call Mr. Alfred Herr to present the report on observation of the early parliamentary elections in Bulgaria, which took place on the 11th of July. You have 3 minutes. Mr. Herr, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chair. These were the second elections in Bulgaria that took place because in April, Bulgaria was not able to form a government. The elections were held in a competitive and fundamental freedoms were generally respected. The campaign environment was dominated by mutual accusations of corruption between the former ruling party and the provisional government, as well as by efforts by law enforcement to curb vote buying. The elections were conducted under a legal framework which, though overall adequate, was substantially revised shortly before the elections, straining election preparations and affecting legal certainty. The activities of the provisional government and of the former ruling party GERB dominated media coverage, overshadowing that of the campaign and of other contestants. The lack of investigation of attacks on journalists, coupled with the criminalizations of defamation, contributes to self-censorships. There were machine voting in July again, and this was done properly. But of course, we need also to explain better to the people how to use those machines in order that they can be used efficiently. Overall, the main problem that we face today is the fact that the parties are not able to form a government and we will have a third elections in November. The winner of the elections in July there are such people with 24%. The former ruling party, GERB, had 23.51%, Bulgarian Socialist Party 13.3%, Democratic Bulgaria Coalition 12.6%, Movement for Rights and Freedom 10.7%, and Coalition Stand Up, Get Tough Out 5%. We hope, and that's our main concern, not the technical aspects of the elections. As I said, they were in line, and the cooperation also between the observing bodies and the government was okay. We could observe freely the elections, but the main problem is that if, again, no government will be formed after the November elections, it will be a mistrust by the people, because you cannot call the people for a fourth time to the elections. And I really urge the parties that are involved now in November elections, after we have the results, that they are really should form a government, because people really go to vote in order that they have a legitimate government after elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herr. Finally, I call Mr. Stefan Schenach to present the report observation of the early parliamentary elections in the Republic of Moldova. You have 3 minutes. Mr. Schenach, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And you was a part of our team in Moldova, which was excellent. First, I want to thank our committee in the pre-electoral mission and in the electoral mission for their work together, and I had the honor to chair it. Tini Cox said in a committee meeting on the election day in Moldova, and the result was a feast of democracy. And indeed, it was a feast of democracy. In the pre-electoral mission, we was deeply concerned about the polarized environment and the instability. And that, for example, nobody could control the funding of candidates and parties. And there was still a question always open in Moldova, in the Republic of Moldova, how many polling stations they have abroad and why it's so different. So less in this country and so much in another country. But at the end, nearly 50% took part in this election, and first time there is a clear result. President Maya Sandu, which was in the plenary before here, got an absolute majority with her party. So it's not anymore necessary the old deal to buy some members of the parliament, you make crazy coalitions. Now there are 3 parties now in the parliament of the Republic of Moldova. One is the party of Maya Sandu with more than 52%. The second is an alliance of the communist and the socialist of Voronin and Dodon. And the third is the oligarch Shor. And now it's very clear, and I hope that Mrs. Sandu and her party will use this possibility, which they have, to let back the title of captured country, or the full of corruption, and I hope that the justice will find also the former prime minister. Those party is not anymore in the parliament, but those party has still more than 150 mayors. So I think Mrs. Sandu must also be very sensible how to work inside the country. But we can only really congratulate. This was a very wonderful, peaceful, and clear day for the country, and gives
a big hope to the citizens of the Republic of Moldova.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shenach. The debate will start in the afternoon at 3:30. And now the next item on the agenda is the Vaclav Havel Human Rights Prize Award Ceremony. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, honorable guests, Mr. President of the Congress, welcome. Monsieur Jean-Claude Millon, qui a débuté avec le prix, je vous souhaite la bienvenue. I hereby declare open the award ceremony of the Vaclav Havel Human Rights Prize. Before I invite all of you to watch a short video on the prize, I would like to welcome the representatives of our three shortlisted candidates. By saying a brief word on why this occasion goes to the very heart of what the Council of Europe represents. Protecting and upholding human rights is our core mission, the very raison d'être of this institution and what we stand for in the Parliamentary Assembly. We are often referred to, and our actions back it up, as the democratic consciousness of Europe. We put the interest of the people that have elected us in the heart of everything we do. And we do not do this alone. We do it together with the people we represent, the thousands of individuals and organizations who share our values and goals, protection of fundamental freedoms and human dignity. Today, with the Vaclav Havel Prize, we recognize and honor their work and their sacrifices to uphold these. May I ask to play the video?
The 10th of May, 1990. The President of the Czech and Slovak Federal Republic entered the Assembly Chamber of the Council of Europe. It was an emotional parliamentary assembly that welcomed the former political dissident, the figurehead of the Velvet Revolution, who in 1989 brought an end to the communist regime. In his welcoming address, the Assembly President paid tribute to the courage of one of the key figures of the opposition in the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic.
And you, Mr. President, are a symbol of the victory of freedom over totalitarianism.
In his speech, the philosopher president, an atypical politician, spoke of his years of opposition when dreams took the place of hope.
Everything seems to point to the fact that we should not be afraid of dreaming of what seems impossible if we want something impossible to become a fact and a reality. Without dreaming of a better Europe, we shall never be able to build it.
Following the invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968, which marked the end of the liberalization process of the Prague Spring, Václav Havel remained faithful to his convictions. As chairperson of the Circle of Independent Writers, his commitment led to the banning of his plays. The international community quickly became aware of this dissident. In 1977, Václav Havel co-founded Charter 77, an organization defending human rights in Czechoslovakia. Because of his activities, he was imprisoned on 3 occasions for almost 5 years. In 1989, the crowd spontaneously placed Vaclav Havel at the head of the Civic Forum, an association uniting opposition movements. He became a key figure in the Velvet Revolution. Almost a quarter of a century later, in March 2013, the prize was launched in Prague to honor what Vaclav Havel was and what he did. Since then, the prize is awarded each year by the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly in partnership with the Vaclav Havel Library and the Charter 77 Foundation to reward outstanding civil society action in the defense of human rights. For the 9th edition of the prize, the 3 candidates shortlisted are Maria Kolesnikova, Belarus. The nominee is one of the opposition leaders in Belarus and a member of the Coordination Council. She was the head of the campaign headquarters of former presidential nominee Viktor Babarika. In September 2021, she was sentenced to lengthy prison terms on so-called conspiracy charges. Reporters Sans Frontières. Since 1985, RSF has provided emergency support to thousands of journalists at risk around the world and obtained the release of several detained journalists. RSF systematically takes steps to ensure investigation and legal proceedings against those responsible for the murder of journalists. Germain Rukuki, Burundi. The nominee is a human rights defender who has been campaigning in the human rights field for years, in particular against torture and the death penalty. Since 2015, human rights defenders and organizations in Burundi have been facing a shrinking space and have been targeted by the authorities. In 1990, Mr. Havel spoke in Strasbourg of the immense strength embodied by the ideals of the Council of Europe. Referring to the organization's emblem, he said that for him, the 12 stars did not express the idea that the Council of Europe would succeed in building a heaven on earth, as there would never be a heaven on earth.
But, in my opinion, these 12 stars are a reminder that the world can become a better place if we have the courage to raise our eyes to the stars.
The Václav Havel Human Rights Prize pays tribute to this distinguished European, and it also pays tribute to all those who, through their determined and tireless work, bring us closer to the ideal of a better world.
Dear colleagues, all of you present and online, dear nominees, to my left, all 3 of you, a warm welcome to the 9th edition of the award ceremony of the Vaclav Havel Human Rights Prize, and special thanks to our partners for their cooperation, the Czech movement, the Czech government, the Vaclav Havel Library, and the Charta 77 Foundation members of the selection panel, whose commitment and dedication are fundamental to uphold the work, legacy and values embodied by Mr. Havel. A prize is not always something that you get, it can also be something that you pay. Mr. Havel's work to protect democracy and safeguard human rights came with a heavy price, his own personal safety and well-being. Yet to this mind, and this is indeed what today it's all about, human rights were worth the price of putting at risk and jeopardizing the individual freedom and personal safety. Was it easy? No, it was hard. Yet, but courage, Mr. Havel argued, is what it required to make the world a better place. It is this very word, courage, that I believe best describes our 3 present shortlisted candidates, or representatives, if I may say. Just like Mr. Havel, all candidates represent and has shown a willingness to sacrifice their own safety, their own well-being, ultimately their own freedom, for a greater cause, the protection of human rights of all. And likewise, Mr. Havel, the nominees have paid a price for the courage they have shown, for advocating for something larger than themselves. Their willingness, however, to pay that price for their convictions, that, ladies and gentlemen, is courage. Honourable members and colleagues, the three shortlisted candidates, as you have seen on the screen for the 2021 Vaclav Havel Prize are Ms. Maria Kalesnikava of Belarus, Mr. Germain Rukuki of Burundi, the NGO Reporters Without Borders. Ms. Maria Kalesnikava is a Belarusian, or a Belarus, I should say, opposition leader and a representative for the people's struggle for civil and political liberties. Yet, Ms. Kalesnikava belief in human rights came at a very high cost. She has been detained since September of last year. Her crime? Wanting to have a say in who is in charge of her country, in standing up against a regime who chose force and brutality against peaceful and legitimate protest. She showed that she is ready to risk her own safety to a cause greater than herself. Ms. Kalesnikava truly represents courage. Mr. Germain Rukuki is a human rights defender from Burundi. As a tireless campaigner against torture and the death penalty, Mr. Rukuki was sentenced to 32 years in prison in 2018 in an attempt to silence him. It is with great relief that we learned that Mr. Rukuki was finally released from prison this year, although being still at risk, but I was informed by his sister that he is safe and sound. His determination, which led to his ultimate loss of freedom, tells us that strongly believe in a cause greater than himself. Mr. Rukuki, therefore, truly also represents courage. The work and perseverance of both Ms. Kalesnikava and Mr. Rukuki might have never reached our awareness were it not for our third candidate, Reporters Without Borders. Not only do they provide emergency support for the thousands of journalists who risk their lives reporting from the most dangerous of parts of the world, they also take steps to ensure legal proceedings against those who threaten, put at risk, or sadly kill journalists. In their willingness to risk their own safety to let us know what is going on in the world, Reporters Without Borders is certainly an organization that stands for courage. Now, picking up the winner, it's a bit of a special word, let's call it the primus inter pares, is never an easy job. The shortlisted nominees all represent causes greater than themselves and will forever be a source of inspiration to all of us. They all represent what Vaclav Havel deemed essential, courage. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to announce what I would call the primus inter pares, the winner of the Vaclav Havel Human Rights Prize 2021. And I have to say it is a candidate who is quite close to the image of Havel himself. The winner, ladies and gentlemen, is Maria Kalesnikava. And a big diploma.
Yeah, thank you. Can you help me to hold
Yes.
it?
Watch out, it doesn't fall out. Eh? Voilà.
Huh?
Voilà. So here we can have a little bit to the left.
Yeah.
Voilà.
Thank you
May
very
I
much.
ask you to stay here? May I ask the two laureates to come with me? And as I said, it's primus inter pares because in the hearts and the minds of the jury, all deserve this prize. Reporters sans frontières.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Voilà. Maybe we can have a photo of the three of you, please. Just in the middle.
Yeah.
Voilà. And I'll just stand on the side.
Thank you very much.
May I now yield the floor to the sister of Maria Kalesnikava. Please, madam.
Can I put off the mask? Is it allowed? Can I put it?
Yes. No.
No? Thank you very much. I'm very glad that this award, my sister received this award, and I think she would probably say right now that she dedicates it to all the Belarusian people, to Belarusian political prisoners who fight for their freedom. So I want you to look at Maria, and look at her face, her honest and open look. I ask you to see thousands of people, political prisoners and others who persecuted for political reasons, who are now in prisons just because they said what they want, what they think. Who are they? They are human rights activists, human rights defenders. By the way, Ales Belyansky, who was laureate, Vaclav Havel Award laureate for 2013, he's also in prison now. It's Marfa Rabkova, it's lawyer Maxim Znak, bank chairman Viktor Babarika, editor-in-chief Maria Zolotova, Igor Losik, journalists Olga Loika, Yelena Tolkacheva. It's Alana Gibromirian, she was Svetlana Tikhanovskaya representative for youth and student affairs. There are Rita Rees, Galina Derbish, Igor Kapanaika, minors, infants actually. They are children, Petr Kirik, Dmitry Strizhak, and hundreds and thousands of people who are in prison today. This award is a sign of solidarity of the entire democratic world with people of Belarus. It's also a clear signal to us, Belarusians, that international democratic community supports us and we are on the right track. From the other side, it's a clear signal to Belarusian authorities that the world will never bear with massive violations of human rights and will not accept what is happening in Belarus now. If we do not want Belarus to turn into Gulag, we must support the Belarusian people today and now. In the meantime, hundreds of political prisoners are kept in Belarusian jails in awful conditions under false politically motivated accusations, serving unjust and unlawful sentences. The number of Belarusian political prisoners continues to grow, and people are accused of being disloyal to the state. They receive huge sentences, are sent to prisons, and sacrifice their freedom and sometimes their life. There was a case of death already under obscure circumstances of Vitold Ashurok in one of the kennels, and his relatives does not know what happened to him. He just dead, no investigation, no details. Freedom is not given in a simple way, and now Belarus is a clear evidence of this. Belarus is not the only state that has not yet been able to build a stable democratic system. This challenge is global. It depends on all of us. How all the democratic forces of Belarus united in 2020, how persistently and boldly we Belarusians are now fighting for our freedom, it has already gone down in history. Millions of Belarusians fight every day for the right to determine our own future, to be free. It is important to remember that the future of the whole nation is at stake. We need to be patient and go to the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having delivered these words on behalf of your sister. Very touching. And as all of you can see, our laureates all deserve it, but obviously the person of Maria Kalesnikava is really in the hearts and the minds of the jury, at least, very close as the other ones too, but very close to all that Vaclav Havel represents. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the ceremony. Thank you.